So, with that being said, so he covers everything Philadelphia. And man, he's definitely one of the best content creators around in the industry. You see him on Wire to Wire podcast as well. Gene Walczak is joining me here via the Global Satellite Network, presented by StreamYard. Well, Gene, I mean, we had a lot to say about, the Seahawks and Geno Smith, but again, it's like, when do you ever have a story like this? Like this is just ridiculous and it's amazing. But I mean, we've watched Kurt Warner win the Super Bowl with the Rams, and people didn't believe in his talent. But sure enough, he rose above the odds and just goes and he plays his game that he always loved watching and wins the Super Bowl. I'm looking at Geno Smith right now, and he's putting up MVP caliber numbers, and the Seahawks are just they're thriving with a lot of these young cats. Like, how is this possible with Seattle?
Well, they wrote me off, and I didn't write back. I mean, Geno Smith, that was the line of the year, man. When he said that, when they were talking about his career, they wrote me off, but I didn't write back. I felt that. I really did. I watched Geno Smith in West Virginia. I wanted him to be an Eagle. Funny story. I don't know if you've seen it on the Kelsey's podcast, where him and Travis Kelce were basically who the Jets were deciding from when they were drafting Geno Smith.
Oh, wow.
But he got punched in the face by a teammate in the Jets. He goes over to Seattle to be Russell Wilson's backup quarterback. When they trade for Drew Lock after they traded Russell Wilson, everyone just assumed it was Drew Lock's job, and Geno outperformed him. And what does that remind you of? It reminds you of when Matt Flynn was given the job in Seattle and Russell Wilson outperformed him in camp, and Pete Carroll gave the job to the better player.
Yeah, and they paid him this money on top of it, too.
Exactly. It doesn't matter who's getting paid. And I think that's what the players in Seattle really respect is it doesn't matter what you're getting paid. Pete Carroll is going to put the team in the best position to win and put the best players on the field. They drafted Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny didn't start over Chris Carson for until his third year when Chris Carson retired because Chris Carson was the better player. And when you go through what he does in Seattle, Richard Sherman just said this recently where he said it wasn't Russ that made Seattle, it was Pete Carroll that made Russ. And I think that was really telling. So I love the story with Geno Smith. And I think your comparison to Kurt Warner is a great one. I think it's a perfect comparison.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, you got to think. I mean, yeah, like Kurt Warner, he had a bunch of, practice invites. I mean, he'd gone from, Green Bay to several other places until Dick Vermeil found him and just loved exactly what he brought to the table. And you got to think, too, this is what's so strange to me, is that the fact that you look at that Rams team, and they had Torrey Holt, they had Isaac Bruce, they had close to, Marshall Faulk. Like, how is it that you bring a guy out of nowhere who then plugs into this offense, and it's just like that was a match made in heaven in the end, and they just perform well. And that was a great Super Bowl, by the way. I mean, you're talking about Steve McNair on the other side with the Titans, and like all odds were against them, and then sure enough, the Rams pulled away with it.
I mean, how about the fact that it needed a backup quarterback? Trent Green getting hurt on the first week of the season.
Yeah.
That, like how close was that story to not being written?
Oh my God. And this is the other funny thing is because it almost, I mean, even though Tom Brady was drafted late in the round, but Drew Bledsoe goes down, and then the rest of the dynasty story was from there. Like it's nuts. Like it's just the NFL is just so king for this because it's like, and listen, I'm a baseball guy. I love history. But it's like now the NFL is starting to give me stories I've never read before. And like baseball used to be like that. Now baseball, it's changed in so many ways. But it's like now you start to see the NFL and it's just like, you know what? I'm all in for the story. Like I can't wait for a book to be written about this. And I'll just read this maybe 2-3 times and just constantly remind myself like there is no such thing as as any type of ceiling. It's where you lead the pack. Like it's where you ride the wave with the boat you're running. Like seriously, like it's crazy how this is.
Sports is poetry.
Yeah.
People wonder why people fall in love with sports so much, and it's stories that you can relate to. It's stories that you can follow. By the way, speaking of you being a baseball guy, your call of the Phillies home run. Listen, I know you're not a Phillies guy, but it was special, man. I was really hoping that you could call some of the World Series games. We'll replace John Schmaltz with you, because
Oh my
man,
God. You have no idea how many people have like literally told me whether it's John Smoltz or it's Joe Buck or either of those guys. It's just like, look, I don't have to be a dinosaur to literally know like the currency of the game, the histories of it, and then at the same time, you're opening up some fun facts. And like, because again, I was like watching that game, and we'll get to this now with Philadelphia and like talking a little of the Phillies, watching that game from game 3 and calling it brought me back to 2008. I mean, that was the most energetic that I've seen Citizens Bank Park. And of course, one of the colleagues key in the building, she's obviously a few minutes away from where Citizens Bank Park is. And it gets crazy out there.
oh yeah.
And in the end, I was like, this was exactly the story set. Like the Phillies are back in it. They had not been back in the World Series since 2009, let alone winning in 2008. But this energy and the crowd was just something special to watch.
The Phillies are when it's Red October and when the Phillies are in the postseason, the amount of Phillies shirts and Phillies fans that you see around the streets of Philadelphia, because I'm from Philadelphia, I live right outside Philadelphia now, but it's insanity. And I tell you right now, I know this happens in a lot of sports cities, but I bet you if you looked at the economics of how much like merchandise gets purchased during like a Philadelphia postseason run, it's absolutely insane. It's plain insanity. You just see everyone wearing Phillies gear. People that aren't Phillies fans, like fair weather fans, they're just hopping on the bandwagon. I'm not saying all Philly fans are bandwagon fans, but like it's cool to watch, right? It's cool to watch everybody join on for the ride. That Phillies team, and the fact that they picked up the Red Sox song from, I think it was 2020 or 2019, Dancing on My Own. It was poetic. It was, I'm in the corner. Why can't you see me? You see the Dodgers, you see the Braves, you see the Houston Astros. I'm just dancing on my own. I'm just continuing to dance on my own.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Gene Walczak joining me here on the show. And just to touch upon it one more for the Phillies is that, I mean, it was an absolutely great story. And to me, living here in Las Vegas, I've watched Bryce Harper grow up. I've watched him from the times where he was in Las Vegas high school to the point where he was at College of Southern Nevada. And this was a kid that everybody put on his shoulders, where he was the phenom. He was the chosen one. Like they made a huge thing of this the second he got the cover of Sports Illustrated. And watching him for 10 years in this league and to finally make it into the World Series, that has to be something humbling. And you got to think, he comes from, a background where here in Vegas, man, like I can't begin to tell you how high the expectations are for players, because everybody's looking for the next Bryce Harper. They're looking for the next Chris Bryant, even Joey Gallo. Like, and I feel for a lot of these young players, because I'm like, look, can't we just go to simple times to where it was fun, where you taught these kids what baseball and life is all about? Like, and in the end, you're going to get successful gentlemen, whether they do continue their baseball career or they don't. But watching Bryce in Washington as the number 2 overall pick in front of one person who felt salty about this, and this is Mike Trout. I mean, you got to think, this is horrifying for him to see this with the Angels and the way they are going on that direction and that whole train. I feel bad for him. But Bryce making it here, and he looks so different. Like, if you notice when they won the NLCS and he was there on the press conference, I noticed a change in his personality. It's like you've gone through 10 years of you were the absolute phenom. You were the guy that everybody couldn't stop talking about. You were the MVP in 2015, and people started criticizing. Is it Bryce that's the problem that they can't get to the World Series or he can't get past the hump? Then he got to the World Series, and it's like a lot of that changed. Is that priming for the Phillies potentially that they're like, they've got this group and now they're willing to take that step ahead where they want to get back in? What was your thoughts looking at Bryce Harper this year?
I don't think there's a more Philly guy currently than Bryce Harper. And I know he's not from Philly, but like in Philadelphia, we have this thing about athletes, right? And I'm going to give you like a quick backstory for it, and then I'll get right into it. But Chase Utley, Brian Dawkins, Jason Kelsey, they're Philly guys. Like, you know, in Philadelphia never really embraced Donovan McNabb. He had that schmug attitude in every press conference that no, seriously. And it was just like,
oh yeah,
of course I'm a Hall of Famer. And that mentality of not putting your head down and going out and getting it. And Bryce Harper embraced this fan base the moment he signed that contract. From the bandana that he wears with the Fanatic, from the cleats to everything that he does in the community, the guy is Philly. So when he embraced the community, the love affair for Bryce Harper in Philadelphia became, there's no way there's a more popular any athlete in any sport in this city right now than Bryce Harper. Like MV3 and Red October and what he did. And he's always had a flair for the dramatic, right? Like coming from that high school game when he was like 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts and he just said, get me up, I'm going to end this game. And he hit a walk-off home run. Coming from that to where he's at now, I think that the biggest thing that he's changed is in Washington, he was known as a guy like very Ricky Waters-ish. For who, for what? Maybe I might not die for that, or maybe I might not run out that play. But in Philadelphia, the first, I think it was like the second or third game of the year, he dove for a ball, like face planted, and he's shown that effort every single time he gets on the field. He hustles, he runs things out, he takes extra bases, and he's got a flair for the dramatic. When the moment is big, Bryce Harper steps up. Huge fan of his. Huge fan of what the Phillies are doing. I was not a believer this year. I'll tell you that right now. I didn't think they were going to make the playoffs. I don't think I still don't think they're constructually built well. I think they're built long ball, 2 starters, not a lot of depth. Ranger could be your 3rd starter, obviously, but I don't think they're built well. And I think this offseason, making that run, putting an extra couple dollars in the front office pocket with all that merch sale, with all those ticket sales, you're going to see them go out and get Trey Turner, and you'll have a true leadoff hitter. You're going to see them go out and get an arm, maybe like a Bassett, and you'll have another arm in that rotation that could potentially help us take the next step. But the depth is not where it needs to be at.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, honestly, it's funny you mentioned about, getting a true leadoff hitter, because I can't begin to tell you how exhausting it was watching Kyle Schwarber be a leadoff guy. Like I've said it several times, I'm like, he does not have the swing for that. Like that swing is either he's in the 4 or the 5 hole. Like you can make an argument. You could put Reese Hoskins or you could put Nick Castellanos in the 2 and then have Bryce Harper be that best player in that lineup. And then you just follow it from there. Like the 1 through 6 would be dangerous, but it's crazy to me. But man, I'm telling you, like between you and between Key and a lot of people that live up in Philadelphia, I have yet to visit Philadelphia. Like I hear a lot of stories. It's a tough town. Like it builds a lot of thick skin, but you got to think like all the players right now, Joel Embiid is Philadelphia. Like there's no question about that. He's zero filter. He's a guy that's like, I don't care what people say on the outside. I'm playing my game and I'm playing to the fullest effort because that's what Philly is. I mean, you even got the Eagles right now. I mean, Jalen Hurts, I think, is Philadelphia.
He is.
The fact that people the fact that people criticized him since his tenure in Alabama and then changing to Oklahoma, that's insane. And every year he's just seeming to get bigger, stronger, and he's getting better at his game. And I think there was no better tandem than adding A.J. Brown in the middle of that mix. So talking about the Eagles, I mean, they got a pretty good game amongst them on Monday night, and that's going to be interesting to watch. But seeing them still undefeated, I got nothing for them. Like offensively, defensively, they're so damn good. And they added in so many pieces. I mean, Hassan Reddick comes back home to Philadelphia. Then you've got Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean, a double whammy of really good defensive guys, and add Kaiser White and then CJ Gardner along with James Brown. Like, what the hell, Howie? Like, this is insane. Like, everybody thought Howie was just good, like losing his mind because of how the train rode with the Carson Wentz era. But this team, compared to the Super Bowl team they had in 17, is it possible, though, because a lot of people are criticizing this, just because they're undefeated doesn't mean anything until you win the championship. We all know this. But what seems to be so different about this group versus the 17 Super Bowl group?
I don't know how much is different. It's the lunch pail mentality. And in Philadelphia, that's embraced, right? And I think Jason Kelce being the leader in that locker room, he knows the city better than anyone. So when you come into that locker room, we want that lunch pail mentality. We're checking in the work. We're working hard. And I think the reason Jalen Hurts fits so well into Philadelphia is because he's a tryhard. And that's what he is. Let's call it what it is. Physical specimen. I mean, he can lift weights, but his attributes are not what you would primarily look for in a quarterback. His arm strength lacks, his accuracy lacks. But guess what? You know what he's the best at? Getting better. He's the best at getting better. He constantly works on his game. He's the last one he's the last one to practice. He's the first one there. I know it's a cliche to say that, but he's truly that guy. Son of a coach. So he's been coached and groomed in this his entire life. And want to hear something crazy? You know, this year's the first year he's had the same head coach 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
That's insanity, right?
That's insane.
Why he's starting, obviously. I think he was at Bama a year. I think he was at Bama for 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah, he was at Bama for 2 years before Tua Tagovailoa. And the story we're seeing right now with Miami. I mean, that again, I felt for Jalen Hurts in that national championship game because it was like they were trailing, and then all of a sudden Tua comes in, and now he's the next big thing. Like that's tough to hold on to. But yet going from Bama, yeah, but going from Bama to Oklahoma to Lincoln Riley, like that whole story and that narrative was insane when I watched him play.
Yeah, builds character. I think that adversity is one of two things. It could break you down or it could build you up. And it really depends. And like you were talking about earlier with Geno Smith, right? They wrote me off. I didn't write back. Those things, when you're benched for Tua Tagovailoa and your coach tells you, go find a situation like what Lincoln Riley has in Oklahoma, and you go over there and you become a Heisman candidate. You get drafted higher than what his projection was. He was projected a 3rd, 4th round pick. The Eagles reached on him in the 2nd round. Doesn't look like a reach anymore. Sat as a backup to a quarterback that just got a massive contract extension. Carson Wentz fell apart. After Carson Wentz fell apart, Jalen Hurts took the reins. Last year, a lot of criticism, including from me, a lot of criticism that they only beat bad teams, which they did. That's all they did was beat bad teams. Comes back this year, looks better, has more weapons with A.J. Brown. The offensive line has more continuity. The entire offensive line started, 6 out of the 8 games. All of a sudden, the line is protecting them. They're running the football. You have a number 1 wide receiver. You have Shane Steichen calling the plays for back-to-back years. Well, being the offense coordinator for back-to-back years. Nick Sirianni called it last year, but he was still the offense coordinator. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome watching him get better. It's watching him get better.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, Jalen Hurts, I mean, he's definitely there in the MVP race with the fact that he's playing so damn good. And I definitely want to touch upon this because of the fact of, like, people were very skeptical, like, because of how last year panned out. I mean, they started 2-5. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, hey, let's give them some flowers. Let's put some flowers right there on the front of, of the stadium. And my God, like after all that, they go into this really interesting run and they're 9-7. Like that's crazy to me. And the fact that they make it into the playoffs when people were all writing them off. Now, I know tough matchup between Tampa Bay and Tom Brady, but they managed to make it. And then in the end, they had an agenda and there was a goal that they have yet to reach. So that's where they were really working hard on it. And like I said, I am very surprised of how Howie Roseman, and then he gets an extension being a general manager. Like that's like, I mean, this is great. This is absolutely great watching the Eagles playing as hard as they are, and they're just believing in each other. There's an entire belief system there. But there was some skepticism about, Jonathan Gannon, because, a lot of the times, as far as, shaping the defense, we thought, dude, this guy seems to be struggling. Now he's gotten all these pieces from the offseason and then all of a sudden gets Robert Quinn in the trade deadline. Like, it's like you're adding more and more pieces as they go, and you're not even sacrificing that much. So it's like it's panning out for him. But on the offensive side, watching Shane Steichen. Now, I'm a diehard Charger fan. I don't show my fandom, but I knew with what Shane Steichen was. And I'm still sore of the fact that the Chargers never retained him after losing, Anthony Lynn. They changed the entire coaching staff. Watching him offensively, he led a team to where they were 7th in the offense with a young Justin Herbert. And then bringing those skills to Philadelphia, to building Jalen Hurts, is in fact Shane Steichen very worthy of a head coaching job. I mean, this guy, I watch him be so creative, and it's an offensive-centric league. This guy comes up with a lot of different schematic plays. Like, do you think that's what we'll see with Shane Steichen come next year?
Unfortunately, yes. I think he'll definitely get a head coaching job. I think he's one of the – when you look at what's going on in the Eagles organization, undefeated, they're going to make a playoff run, whether or not it leads to a Super Bowl or not. But that's how coordinators are picked. Happens all the time. You look at the hot team, the hot coordinator, and Shane Steichen is that guy this year. Unfortunately, yeah, I don't want him to leave. I think that Indianapolis did a very poor job of getting rid of a guy that I would love to step in that role, Frank Wright. But at the end of the day, yeah, I think he'll get a head coaching job. He's calling the plays well. The offense is moving well. And every single game, he has a game plan that seems to he's pushing the right buttons. So the Eagles offensive line had a little bit of injuries on the front. So they were down 3 linemen in one game. It was screen pass after screen pass to Devontae Smith. When they get healthy, it's run, run, run. When, they're putting 8 men in the box, A.J. Brown has 3 touchdowns versus Pittsburgh. Every time a defense schematically is showing the Eagles one thing, it seems like Shane has a counter offer that's there. The one play I thought stood out to me more than any. The Eagles were running a ton of screens to Devontae Smith. And the next week, it was first quarter, they ran a fake screen and go that went for a touchdown to Devontae Smith down the left sideline. And it was like they showed the same look that you were looking at the whole prior week. You had to look at this. This play happened 6, 7, 8 times. They showed the same look, and it was basically a screen and go. They bid on the screen, and the person that was normally blocking for the screen took off down the sideline, and 6 points on the board. And it's just that's what Philadelphia's doing right now. They feel like they're the more prepared team every game they're walking into.
It's so funny you mentioned that play because I do remember seeing something similarly like that in 2020 when the Chargers were playing the Buccaneers. And sure enough, not even close to like at least a household name just yet. But that play that Tampa Bay didn't even know what they were getting into when it came to Justin Herbert. I mean, Tom Brady's known Phillip Rivers for a long amount of time. But then the second that Tampa scores, they get the lead. in comes, Justin Herbert, and off his back foot, there's Jalen Guyton all the way down, deep downfield, and he's wide open for the touchdown. I'm like, that is a Shane Steichen play. Like that is what you do when you give an offensive coordinator who's that clever, and we just see it, man. Like that's where I was like, it's so funny you bring up that kind of play, because I do remember seeing something similarly like that when in his tenure as an OC over at in LA. Speaking of offensive coordinators, and while we got a few minutes, we're seeing the Chicago Bears right now. And I know they're not a great team, but Luke Getsy, I'll be honest, that guy is clever as an offensive coordinator. I mean, he has to be happy of the fact of getting Chase Claypool as a wide receiver now to helping Justin Fields. Darnell Mooney can finally get some rest now where he doesn't have to feel like he's the Superman of the wide receiving core. I mean, the Bears do have a lot of work to do, but Justin Fields, after that game last week, he is the franchise quarterback. Like, that is the first time ever you ever hear somebody say that Chicago Bear quarterback is the franchise quarterback. We hadn't said that since Jim McMahon. Like that's it's crazy. But looking at the offensive schematic, I mean, watching them, they got a lot of money to spend. Are we potentially going to see something different with this offense come next year? Because we're seeing it now. We're getting a preview of it. Are we going to see something maybe even bigger down the stretch come next season?
I sure hope so. I don't think Chicago deserves somebody like Justin Fields. And I hate saying it this way. I bought a shirt. I just created it. It's called Free Justin Fields, and it's got a big X. Chicago Bears. And like, nothing against Chicago fans. Mm-hmm. I just think the McCaskey-Cowles family has screwed up there for so long. You draft a quarterback with the 11th overall draft pick, and you surround him with the 30th best line and the 32nd best receiving core in football. And and they're calling him Bustin' Fields. If Justin Fields wasn't so talented, they would have ran him out of town. Mock drafts just 3 weeks ago had them drafting CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. Justin Fields is the real deal. I said this before the season started. That kid is going to be an MVP candidate, not this year, but in the future. And you're starting to see what I've seen in Ohio State from Justin Fields when he put 6 touchdowns up against Clemson in the college football playoff.
And he took that horrendous hit too, dude. Like that, and then still ribs. To get back up and make a play, that was insane.
Broken ribs and taking that hit and being able to throw for 6 touchdowns versus Clemson. And Clemson was no joke. Their defense was very good. Justin Fields is incredible. I don't give the credit to Chicago's coaching staff that I give to Justin. It seems as if he's, screw it. I'm going to use my legs more. Broke Michael Vick's rushing record last week. And a lot of them aren't designed run plays. A lot of them are him scrambling and creating something with his legs. Yeah, I guess adding Chase Claypool's better than N'Keal Harry.
Yeah.
But like, at the end of the day, like, you gave up Roquan Smith for a second and then gave up an earlier second to get Chase Claypool. If in this grand scheme of life, right? If you had Roquan Smith and Chase Claypool and we're like, who's more valuable to a franchise? 100 times out of 100, you're taking Roquan Smith. So I don't give the Chicago Bears coaching staff, organization any credit for what Justin Fields is doing in Chicago. I give that credit specifically to Justin Fields. Kid's a baller. I cannot wait to see. And now hopefully they put a team around him this next year. But you want to talk about a kid who walked into Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy, and then they don't fix the offensive line, and then they hire a defensive head coach and Matt Eberflus. They don't add any weapons, and they're like, yeah, Justin, the reins are yours. I don't. And then we're going to give credit. It's like watching Moneyball and giving credit to the head coach.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely agree. My biggest thing is like, because I knew with what we were going to get with Justin Fields, and I'm on the same boat as you are. There was no quarterback I feared more for than Justin Fields, because look, you're in the same draft class as Trevor Lawrence, I mean, I think he'll clean a lot of this stuff up because he's supposed to be a generational type quarterback. And having a guy like a former Philadelphia Eagle and champion, Doug Peterson, he's going to figure this out. Zach Wilson, I'm already just I don't know what I'm going to get this week, but I have a feeling it's not going to be pretty. And I think we already kind of felt that judgment with Zach Wilson. But then watching Justin Fields and what he does bring to the table is outstanding. And no, you're right. And I mean, yeah, you'll have a coaching staff that they just got to do exactly what their job description is. And I mean, you think Eberflus, a defensive coordinator from Indianapolis, coming in and yet still utilizing a lot of the defense without Roquan Smith, and that's a crazy thing. You think of the 18 defense, Khalil Mack, Danny Trevathan, Roquan Smith, Robert Quinn, Adrian Amos. A lot of these defensive guys naming off, they're all gone. And all you still have is Eddie Jackson. So it's crazy, seeing that change. But yeah, I mean, the coaching staff, there's parts of it, but in the end, it's all Justin Fields. And I think he is overcoming a lot of those adversities. And he's like, screw it. I'm just going to go off script, which a lot of quarterbacks do, and he's just going to be playing his game. I'm excited to see that too next year.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, and I don't think that Chicago is really utilizing their defense very well. They're giving up 49 to Dallas, 36 to Miami. They're not playing good defensive ball with a defensive head coach. Mm-hmm. I think that Matt Eberflus made it very clear that he didn't value his defensive side of the ball, and they weren't his guys. Right. When with the Roquan non-extension, and they have all that money, it's not like they can't afford to pay Roquan.
Right.
Kid's a young linebacker. Kid's going to be a stud. Watch what he does in Baltimore. Chicago's going to regret the day of letting Roquan Smith walk out the door.
I absolutely agree, man. That's going to be crazy. Real quick, so Washington Commanders against the Philadelphia Eagles Monday night. So the Eagles, they saw Carson Wentz, the first time back in the NFC East. And that was an ugly game for Washington. In the end, it was all lopsided. Philadelphia was just kicking their asses. And so here we are now with Taylor Heineke. How do we expect this game really to go down? Because let's be honest, a lot of these betting games so far have been one score or less. That's insane. Not a lot of the favored teams have been able to cover the spreads that they've been given. So it's a minus 11. So that's telling me you're asking Jalen Hurts to throw 2 touchdowns to A.J. Brown, hoping that you might get a little dink and dunker to either Dallas Goedert or Miles Sanders somewhere in the middle of the field, like the screens we were talking about, and at least cover the spread. So with Taylor Heineke, he does have some spurts of he can stay in the game as long as it takes him. So how do you really foresee this game really going through?
So it's scary to me, and I'll tell you why it's scary. Because normally I'm the guy that's all right. You got to be careful with this one. They can beat us any given Sunday. I even said that with Houston. I'm like, that Houston game is going to be way closer than people want it to be. I think that short week going on the road, Dameon Pierce after losing Jordan Davis. But it's scary to me. I don't see how Washington can keep this game close. I think this game is going to be an absolute blowout. It's Monday Night Football. It has the Eagles have extended rest coming from Thursday to Monday, extra prep time. Jake, coming from an outsider's perspective, not an Eagles fan, is there any position on the football field, any position group on the football field that you would give the edge to Washington? Anyone. And I did this on Birds Deep and Wire to Wire, and I look at it, and I don't see any spot where they have an advantage.
Oh, no. I mean, look, outside, honestly, outside of Scary Terry, dude, between him and A.J. Brown, A.J. Brown has that slight edge, but I love watching Terry McLaurin, though. And you're absolutely right. There's not because, first of all, Washington does have a running back by committee, but it's nowhere even close to Philadelphia. Not even close. And Washington lacks tight end. And so you see Dallas Goedert, and he's special. Like, he's the guy that really opens up for midfield. And I mean, we may not see this year, but next year, that kid out of Penn State, Jahan Dotson, that kid's going to be interesting to watch, though. Like, and we're seeing spurts of that, left and right. I watched it in the beginning of the season. I thought he's going to be something special. But no, I think you're right. And then in the end, they're still waiting on Chase Young, and they do have quite the pass rush, but it's nowhere close as an entirety of a defense like Philadelphia.
Well, the argument would be D-line. That's the only one that's close. Linebackers edge the Eagles, secondary edge the Eagles, receivers, quarterback, offensive line, running back. The argument would be defensive line with Jonathan Allen. But man, I don't see where Washington has any advantage in this football game. I see this game getting ugly, especially being a primetime game. You never look ahead. There's never a look ahead or a letdown game on primetime. It just doesn't happen because it's Monday Night Football. But I think the Eagles blow out the Washington Commanders this week. And I don't see it going any other way. And that's what scares me, because I'm not normally this confident with my team. Week 1, I almost predicted the Lions to beat them. That's how.
Unpredictable football.
Yeah, but this I don't see how this game remains close. Every advantage goes to Philadelphia in this game.
Well, I hope you're right, because the favorite -11, man, that's a lot of points to swallow. So, and again, I'm taking them on that -11, and my score prediction was 33-20. Like that's literally how I look at it in this game, because again, you can't count most teams out, but if it comes out to a blowout, I'll be a happy camper from there. Gene, this is so much fun, man. I really do appreciate you jumping on. For all of our viewers and listeners, where all can they find your content and your podcast?
Wire to Wire Sports Podcast is anywhere you can do podcasts. We have the podcasted version on Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio. We're on Facebook. We're trying to grow our YouTube channel. We just basically started it. We used to be in a studio. So subscribe to YouTube, Wire to Wire Sports Podcast. I'm on Twitter. Anywhere you can. Dude, I breathe this, man. It's all my merch. It's everything I do. It's my background. I live and breathe this. So,
man, oh man, that Wire to Wire looks absolutely fire. I definitely got to get wired in and get myself some sort of gear from there. But good talking with you, Gene. And real quick, because one of our good friends out in Boston, shout out to Beantown Breakdown, Bobby out there. We are really pulling for him, and he is kicking ass. Close to being cancer-free. Is getting closer and closer to it, man. He is literally killing cancer, and I am happy of the fact that he has really been pulling for it, man, and he's been really doing well on his tests. Good for Bobby, man. And he's saying the Phillies might get Xander Bogaerts. Boston media is saying that there's $200 million on that table. Like, quick thought, like, that's going to be crazy.
I think that's a little bit of a bluff. I think that's a Trey. I think the Phillies are all in on Trey Turner. I really believe that. He's Bryce Harper's friend. I think that the organization is going to do whatever it can to get Trey Turner. I wouldn't be upset with Xander. Xander's incredible. Let me be clear about that. But I think that's a bluff. I really believe that. I think that Trey Turner ends up in Philadelphia. But hey, man, I'm not upset with the consolation prize of Xander Bogaerts. Not at all.
All right. Well, we'll see exactly how this offseason goes on, because again, it's a few days away. So we're waiting to see money spending right there, man. So I'm excited of the MLB offseason. I think it's going to be chock filled of just massive money on the table, and we'll just see where everybody goes and whether they retain him. So thanks, Gene. I appreciate you, man. We'll definitely do this again soon, and I hope you have a great weekend and enjoy Monday night against those Commanders.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Gene Walczak there for the Wire to Wire podcast. Such a great guy. Knows a lot of his stuff with everything Philadelphia. I mean, like we talked about with, the Phillies. I mean, the fact that they